What if one of the greatest causes of human suffering is not just what we think, our content, but the place from which we're seeing, the context? I painted two tiny people into a painting once without ever consciously thinking I'm painting people. And interestingly, I think the story is illuminative in that it has so much to teach us about content and context, thinking, and conscious awareness. So while my back has been out recently, and just to update you, it's quite a lot better now. I had a handyman come into my studio and put up pegboards so I could hang all of my paint tubes and finally get them off my table space. Ironically, that's actually how my back went out in the first place. Moving absolutely everything around to make room for the handy person to come in. And when I say everything, I mean easels in the living room, easels in the dining room, oil painting stations, pastel stations, drawing stations, little piles of artistic chaos everywhere, basically a small creative hurricane. Anyway, slowly, as my back has started to mend, I've been trying to put the studio back together again so that I can paint. And while I was doing that, I came across all of these little, what we artists call master sketch copies. They are copies that I had painted over the last few years, small paintings, usually 6 inches by 8 inches, a few 8 by 10s, where I copy a painting done by an old master that I love. It's a beautiful way to learn about their process and my process. I usually give myself about 2 hours, give or take. That's it. I've probably done close to 60 of them now. In fact, I actually don't have anywhere to put them anymore. As I was moving them around in the course of this great studio upheaval, thinking maybe I should just sell some of them, there was this one little painting that caught my attention. It's a painting looking down over the ocean from a cliff, an aerial view. Waves are crashing against big rocks. And way up in the corner, in the right-hand corner, there's these two tiny little figures running from the waves. Tiny. I remember this vividly when I painted it. And it always makes me laugh when I think or talk about it. Because the interesting part in all of this was when I painted that piece, I wasn't thinking waves, rocks, human beings, people running from crashing waves. None of that. I was just looking at shape, value, color, edges, proportion. That's it. Completely immersed in seeing. But it wasn't seeing from content. I remember later looking back at the original painting and suddenly noticing, whoa, there are actually 2 little people up there. And then I looked at my own copy. And there they were, perfectly painted in. I couldn't stop laughing. Even though, while I was painting them, my mind never once, not once, registered, these are human beings that I'm painting. And that's actually a very good thing to have happen, painting. I had an art teacher years ago who used to say, if you're painting a portrait, don't paint an eye as what you think an eye looks like. Don't paint a nose as what you think a nose looks like. Paint the shapes. Paint the relationships. Paint what's actually there. And that's what I was doing. Painting from context. It's a very different way of seeing. In the painting realm, the mind is immersed in context, in my humble opinion, if you're painting well. And it's not that you're not using the mind, content, but the foundation always has to come first. Context, conscious awareness. And from there, the content becomes infused quite differently. Not overly conceptual, not trapped in interpretation. It all made me think about how often in life we become completely locked into certain ways of thinking, certain interpretations, mind states, identities, stories that we have. And those locked in ways of seeing often don't help us, especially when we're suffering, especially when we're overwhelmed, especially when the content becomes so loud that we lose access to the foundation that has so much depth. Honestly, it blows my mind. And this is why I keep pointing towards conscious awareness, the context, not as a concept, a philosophy, or a performance, but as an orientation, a place to stand, a larger context where all the content, our thinking, our emotions, our humanness, our fears, our heartbreak, our interpretations, our difficulties can arise and be held. Because when awareness becomes the foundation instead of thought becoming the foundation, something fundamental changes. There's more space, more possibility, more universal intelligence available somehow. Not because the content disappears, but because we are no longer completely trapped inside of it. That's really what these 21 days of reflections have been all about. Not fixing the mind, not transcending humanity, not becoming perfected spiritual athletes floating 6 inches above the earth. No. But discovering again and again that there's another place to stand, and it is radically different from thinking. A context spacious enough to hold the changing content of being human. This is not a conversation we will have once, or a series that is done and dusted after these 21 days. I think this is a conversation worthy of returning to again and again and again for a lifetime. Because the mind, the mind is very good at taking care of itself on the one hand, and on the other hand, living like a decomported horse. Conscious awareness allows us to see, really see, and perhaps even more importantly, it allows us to be seen, to express, to navigate, to live in the depth, to live the allness of our humanity without ever abandoning ourselves. You've already shown that you can stay as you've been following along these last 21 days of reflections on the difference between content and context. It's been such a delight to put both my shoulder to the wheel with regard to my own experience and teachings, and also to see how effortlessly these reflections have come to life. I'm really very honored with your attention. Thank you so much for being here. And there's going to be much more to follow in terms of how we align conscious awareness with the expanding capacity that naturally comes alive from this foundation, allowing us to live in freer choice, especially if you've been living inside suffering or difficulty for any amount of time and wondering how to deal with it all. I'll see you next time.